The galaxy was full of wonders, but none as beautiful as Liara Vanath. She was known across the stars as the shining jewel of Avalon Prime, the galaxy's most famous supermodel. Her skin shimmered like silver dust under starlight. Her hair flowed like liquid light, and her eyes, deep violet and soft, carried a mystery that had made millions fall in love. Every world knew her face. Every camera adored her, but no one knew her heart. Far from the bright lights of her glamorous world, a human scientist named Ethan Cole worked quietly inside the Avalon research station. He was simple, calm, and always focused on his work. His days were filled with studying alien biology, collecting data, and understanding life beyond Earth. He wasn't famous. He wasn't rich, but he was kind, and that kindness shone brighter than any spotlight. Fate has strange ways of bringing two souls together. One busy afternoon, the research station was visited by a group of celebrities for a health awareness event. Liara Vanath, exhausted from endless photo shoots and interviews, was among them. She looked flawless on the outside, but inside she was breaking. The pressure, the loneliness, and the fake smiles had drained her energy completely. As she walked through the sterile white halls of the station, her vision blurred. The world began to spin. Before anyone could react, she collapsed, and it was Ethan who caught her before she hit the floor. He laid her gently on a stretcher, panic flashing in his eyes as he checked her vitals. "Her temperature is unstable! Get me a scanner!" he ordered. The medical bots whirred into motion, but he never let go of her hand. Her silver skin felt warm and soft against his fingers. He didn't even realize who she was. Not the star, not the idol, just a patient who needed help. When Liara finally opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was his face, tired, worried, and human. A stranger who looked at her not with admiration but with care. Where am I?" she whispered, her voice weak but graceful. "In the research ward," Ethan said softly. "You fainted during the visit. You're safe now." She blinked, trying to sit up, but he gently stopped her. "You need rest. You've been pushing yourself too hard." His tone was gentle but firm, the kind of voice that made her want to listen. She had met thousands of men, princes, admirals, and models, but none had spoken to her like that. None had looked at her like she was simply human. "Do you know who I am?" she asked quietly. Ethan smiled a little. "Of course. You're the woman who just scared half the station." Liara blinked, then laughed. A real laugh, not the polite kind she used for interviews. "You're not like the others," she said softly. "You don't treat me like I'm made of glass," Ethan shrugged. "I treat everyone like a person. Fame doesn't change that." There was a strange calm between them, something warm and peaceful. Liara studied him. The rough edges of his hands, the small scar on his cheek, the quiet honesty in his eyes. He wasn't like the perfect faces she saw every day. He was real. Hours passed, and she refused to leave the ward until she felt better. Ethan stayed beside her, checking her readings, offering her water, and even adjusting the blanket around her shoulders. When he thought she was asleep, he whispered to himself, "Even stars need to rest sometimes." But Liara wasn't asleep. She heard his words, and for the first time in years, her heart felt something pure. Comfort. That day marked the beginning of something no one could have imagined. A tired human scientist and a lonely alien superstar had crossed paths in the most ordinary way, yet destiny had quietly taken note. As Liara left the station the next morning, she turned once to look back. Through the glass window, she saw Ethan cleaning his desk, completely unaware of the impact he'd made. She smiled softly. Something inside her whispered that this was not the end. It was the beginning of a story that would change both their worlds forever. Days turned into weeks after Liara's fainting incident, but her mind couldn't forget the human who had held her so gently. Ethan Cole. His name repeated in her thoughts like a quiet song she couldn't stop hearing. She had met countless people, powerful leaders, famous artists, charming actors, but none of them had looked at her the way he did. He didn't see fame. He didn't see beauty. He saw her. So one day, without her usual entourage or cameras, Liara returned to the Avalon Research Station. She came wearing a simple white cloak, her hair tied back, her face free from the glowing makeup the galaxy adored. When she entered the lab, Ethan looked up in surprise. "Liara Vanath?" he said, standing quickly. "I didn't expect to see you here again." Her smile was shy, almost nervous. "I wanted to thank you. You helped me when no one else did." Ethan waved his hand dismissively. "I just did my job." But Liara didn't move. She looked around at the clean, silent lab, so different from the noisy photo studios she lived in. "It's peaceful here," she said softly. "I think I needed some peace." Ethan could see it in her eyes. The exhaustion, the loneliness behind her perfect image. He nodded gently. "You can stay as long as you need. No cameras here." From that day onward, Liara began visiting more often. Sometimes she brought food from the elite restaurants of Avalon City. Sometimes she just sat near the observation window, staring at the stars. Ethan would work quietly nearby, occasionally explaining his research on alien DNA or talking about Earth. She was fascinated by him. "Tell me about your home," she asked one evening. Ethan smiled, leaning back in his chair. "Earth, it's messy, loud, and crowded. But it's alive. Blue oceans, green forests, and skies full of clouds. You'd love the sunsets. They turn everything gold." Liara's eyes softened. "It sounds beautiful," he chuckled. "Not as beautiful as your worlds. I've seen Avalon's twin suns. Nothing on Earth shines like that." She laughed quietly, her silver skin catching the soft lab lights. "You humans always find beauty in everything, even in things others ignore." Ethan shrugged. "That's how we survive. We find hope where others see nothing." Their conversations grew longer with each visit. Liara began to relax, to smile more, to laugh freely. For years, she had been surrounded by admiration, yet none of it had ever felt real. But here, in a cold laboratory with one human scientist, she found warmth she didn't know she was missing. One night, the sky above Avalon was full of streaking comets. Liara sat beside Ethan, her gaze lost in the moving lights. "Do you ever feel small?" she asked suddenly. He nodded. "All the time. But being small doesn't mean being powerless. Even small stars light the dark." She turned to look at him, eyes glimmering. "You say things that make me think too much." Ethan smiled softly. "And you look at me like I'm saying something important." They both laughed. But there was a quietness beneath the laughter, something unspoken, something that made the air feel warmer. As the night went on, Liara dozed off beside him, her head resting lightly on his shoulder. Ethan froze for a moment, unsure what to do, but then he simply smiled and let her rest. The famous Liara Vanath, worshipped by millions, was peacefully sleeping on his shoulder. He whispered to himself, "You're not what they think you are you?" Liara didn't answer, but even in sleep, her lips curved in a small smile as if she had heard him. When she woke, dawn light filtered through the station windows. She found Ethan still sitting beside her, quietly watching the sunrise over Avalon's horizon. "Did you stay awake all night?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Didn't want to wake you." Her heart fluttered. No one had ever cared that much. No one had ever treated her like something real. That morning, as she left the lab, Liara stopped at the door and looked back at him. "Thank you, Ethan," she said with a gentle smile. "You remind me what it means to feel alive." And Ethan watched her go, not realizing that the quiet bond forming between them was already changing the destiny of two species. It started with stars and silence. But something deeper was beginning to bloom. Time moved quietly after that. Liara kept visiting the research station whenever she could. It had become her escape from the noise of fame and the pressure of perfection. Whenever she walked through those silver doors, her heart felt lighter. She could breathe again. Ethan always greeted her with a smile, sometimes teasing her about her clumsy attempts at using lab tools, sometimes sharing his favorite Earth snacks. They laughed together, shared stories, and often sat in peaceful silence, just watching the stars beyond the glass. But destiny, as always, had its own plans. One morning, Liara left the station early. She had to attend a charity event on Drexus Moon, a small colony world not far from Avalon. She promised Ethan she'd return soon. "Don't forget to feed your lab plants," she said with a playful smile before leaving. He grinned. "Don't worry, they're in good hands." But a few hours later, the research station's emergency channel crackled to life. The voice that came through made Ethan's blood run cold. "Mayday, Mayday! This is transport vessel Starflare. We've lost main thrusters while entering Drexus atmosphere. Requesting immediate rescue, repeat vessel going down." The name hit him like a punch. Starflare. That was Liara's ship. Ethan's heart pounded. Without waiting for orders or permission, he grabbed a rescue suit and sprinted toward the shuttle bay. Other staff shouted after him, warning of the radiation storm brewing over Drexus, but he didn't stop. All he could think of was her. The descent was brutal. His small craft shook violently as he broke through the storm clouds. Lightning flashed around him, painting the world in white and purple light. The locator beacon blinked weakly on his screen. The wreckage. The room was quiet when Captain Arla walked in. The soft hum of the starship's engines filled the silence, like a heartbeat echoing through metal walls. The lights were dim, casting a pale blue glow over the med bay. And there, lying on the narrow bed near the window, was the human, Sergeant Michael Hale. He was sleeping. At first, Arla thought he was unconscious again. His body had taken so much damage during the last battle that even their advanced medtech struggled to keep up. But then she saw his chest rising and falling, slow and steady. His arm was wrapped in bandages, his skin bruised and scarred. Yet his face looked peaceful, calm, almost soft in the cold light. Rilla stopped at the door, unsure if she should enter. She had seen this human do impossible things only hours ago. When their squad was trapped under enemy fire, he had walked straight into the flames to pull out her soldiers. His armor had melted in places, his arm burned, but he didn't stop. He kept fighting until the last one of them was safe. She remembered shouting at him to retreat. He didn't listen. He just turned to her and said with that small smile of his, "Not leaving anyone behind, Captain." And now, the same man who had fought like a storm was lying there, asleep. So quiet, it almost didn't feel real. Rilla walked closer, her clawed feet tapping softly against the floor. She stood beside the bed and looked down at him. There was something strange about humans, something she still couldn't understand. They were fragile compared to most species. Their skin tore easily, their bones broke, their lifespans were short, and yet they never gave up. She had fought alongside warriors from many worlds, but none were like him. When others hesitated, the human acted. When others lost hope, he found a reason to fight. And when everything was burning, he kept moving forward. Now she saw another side of him, the side that rested without fear, as if the galaxy couldn't touch him. It made her chest tighten in a way she didn't expect. The monitors beside the bed beeped softly, showing his heartbeat, strong and steady. Rilla reached out and touched the edge of the blanket near his hand. His fingers were rough, scarred from years of battles. A small metallic tag hung from his wrist. She leaned closer to read it. Hale Michael. "Human Defense Forces," she whispered his name under her breath. It sounded heavy, powerful. The way he had fought for them still played in her mind. He had dragged her from the fire when her leg was broken, carrying her through falling debris. She could still feel the warmth of his arms, the pain in his voice as he told her to hold on. He had no reason to save her. She was an alien commander, just another ally in a long war. But he did it anyway. Rilla felt something stir deep inside her chest. Respect, yes, but more than that. Something warmer. Something she couldn't describe. She looked at his sleeping face again. The scars, the soft breathing, the faint twitch of his hand as he dreamed. There was no armor, no weapons, no orders here. Just a human, resting after giving everything he had. She whispered quietly, "How can someone so strong still look so peaceful?" Her voice echoed softly through the quiet med bay. No one answered, of course. But as she stood there, watching over him, she thought she understood a little more about what made humans special. They fought harder, cared deeper, and somehow still found time to rest. Rilla turned and walked to the window. Outside, the stars drifted past like glowing dust. The galaxy was wide and full of danger, but for the first time in a long while, she felt safe. Maybe because a human had shown her that courage didn't always roar. It could also breathe quietly in sleep. And so, she stayed there beside him, guarding his dreams in silence. Captain Arla stood by the window for a long time, watching the stars move slowly outside the ship. But no matter how far they drifted, her mind refused to leave the battlefield. The smell of smoke, the flashes of light, and the sound of humans shouting orders, it all came back like ghosts she couldn't silence. Only a few hours ago, the ground had been burning. The enemy, the Vrak, had attacked with everything they had. Their acid rounds melted armor like water. Centauri soldiers screamed as their lines broke. Rella had seen hopeless battles before, but that one was different. That time death had felt close, like it was waiting for her name. And then, the human arrived. Sergeant Michael Hale didn't wait for orders. He didn't care about ranks or rules. He charged into the chaos when everyone else was falling back. His uniform had already been torn, his arm bleeding, yet he kept going. He dragged one of her soldiers out from under burning wreckage, then another, then her. Arla remembered the pain in her leg, the crushing weight of the metal pinning her down. She had thought that was it, that she would die there, another forgotten name on a lost battlefield. But then, through the smoke, a figure appeared, covered in soot, coughing, eyes burning with fire. "Hail," she had whispered in disbelief. He had grinned, even in the middle of hell. "Hey, Captain, thought you could use a hand." She remembered how he lifted the wreckage with shaking arms, how he ignored the acid burns crawling across his skin, how he carried her across the field while bullets tore the air around them. Each step he took was slower, heavier, but he didn't stop. He kept saying, "We're almost there. Don't close your eyes, Captain. Not yet." When they finally reached cover, he had collapsed beside her, laughing weakly. Even as medics rushed in, even as his blood soaked through his torn sleeves, he smiled like he'd won something great. That smile haunted her now. Rala had fought for years, and she had seen many brave soldiers die. But none like him. Humans were strange, fragile bodies with unbreakable spirits. They didn't fight for conquest or glory. They fought for each other, for friendship, for something invisible yet stronger than any shield. She turned back toward the bed. Hale was still sleeping peacefully, as if none of it had ever happened. His chest rose and fell in a slow rhythm, the small monitor beside him showing a steady heartbeat. For a moment, she wished she could see what he was dreaming about. Maybe he dreamed of his home planet, of blue skies, oceans, and sunlight. Or maybe he dreamed of the people he had lost. There was a small chain around his neck, a metal tag with a name she didn't recognize. She had seen him hold it before every battle. Rala reached out, her claws stopping just short of touching it. She didn't want to disturb his rest. He had earned it. Her mind was full of questions. How could someone so broken keep fighting? Why did he risk his life for others? For aliens he barely knew. She couldn't understand it, but she wanted to. The door behind her opened softly. A medic entered, nodded respectfully, and whispered, "He'll recover, Captain. Slowly, but he'll live." Rella gave a small nod. "He already did more than live," she said quietly. "He saved us all." The medic smiled faintly and left. Rella looked back at the human one last time. She felt something she hadn't felt in years, a quiet admiration mixed with warmth. She sat down in the chair beside his bed. The war might still rage outside the ship, but in that moment, peace lived here, in this small room, where a human rested after saving lives that weren't even his own. Rala folded her arms and whispered to herself, "Maybe this is what makes humans different. They burn like fire, but they never let the fire consume them." She smiled softly. "You're strange, human, but maybe that's what makes you beautiful." And in the soft light of the med bay, while the stars drifted outside, Captain Arla watched over him, guarding the one who had guarded them all. The next morning, the med bay was filled with a soft golden light from the nearby star. Captain Rala returned early, the faint sound of her boots echoing in the quiet room. She carried a small tray of water and nutrients, something the medic said the human would need when he woke up. When she entered, he was still asleep. His hair was messy, his bandages fresh, and yet he looked calmer than anyone she had ever seen. It amazed her how humans could sleep so deeply even after surviving chaos. They closed their eyes and trusted the universe to let them see another sunrise. It was a kind of courage she couldn't fully understand. Rella sat beside the bed again. She watched his chest rise and fall, the steady rhythm of life. For a long time she didn't say a word, but then slowly his eyelids fluttered. He groaned softly and turned his head toward her. His eyes opened, tired but alive. "Morning," he said weakly, his voice rough but still carrying that familiar calm. Rella straightened. "You are awake," he smiled faintly. "That's good news, right?" I was starting to like that nap. She didn't know why, but his humor surprised her. Even now, when his body was covered in injuries, he could still joke. "You were badly hurt, human. You should rest. Rest later," he murmured. "We made it, didn't we?" Rilla nodded slowly. "We did, thanks to you." He looked away as if embarrassed. "Couldn't leave my team behind." That sentence stayed in her mind. My team. She was not human, nor were the others he saved. Yet he said it as if they were his own people. She leaned closer, curiosity glowing in her golden eyes. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why did you come back for us when you could have escaped?" "You could have lived." Hale looked at her for a moment. His eyes, though tired, held a quiet fire. "Because you were there," he said simply. "That is not a reason," Ralla replied gently. "You could have left. No one would blame you." He took a slow breath. "That's not how humans are. We don't walk away when someone needs help. Not if we can still move. Not if there's still a chance." Rella stared at him, trying to understand. "But we are not your kind." "You owe us nothing." He smiled again, small, honest, and warm. "Maybe that's the point. Doesn't matter what you look like, Captain. Doesn't matter where you're from. When someone fights beside you, they're family." For a few seconds, Ralla said nothing. She felt a strange tightness in her throat. Her people had always fought for honor, for orders, for duty. But this human fought for something purer, something that didn't need logic. She looked down at her hands, her claws curling slightly. "You risked your life for strangers," she whispered. "I have never seen such a thing," Hale chuckled weakly. "Guess humans are weird that way." Ralla looked at him again, really looked at him, the rough skin, the tired eyes, the faint smile that somehow made the whole room feel lighter. He didn't have wings, claws, or strength like her kind. Yet, in some way, he felt stronger than any creature she'd ever met. "You are strange," she said softly. "But I am glad you are strange." He laughed, the sound gentle and warm. "That's the nicest thing anyone said to me in weeks." For a while, silence filled the medbay again. Only the steady heartbeat monitor broke the stillness. Rilla sat quietly, her mind lost in thought. She finally spoke again, her voice low. "You humans are fragile, yet you fight like you are unbreakable." Hale turned his head toward her, his voice soft. "Maybe we just care too much." "That's our strength, Captain." "We care, even when it hurts." Rilla felt her chest tighten again, an emotion she couldn't name. She wanted to argue, to say caring made one weak. But looking at him, lying there after saving lives that weren't his own, she couldn't say that anymore. Instead, she simply whispered, "Rest now, human." "The galaxy can wait," he smiled, eyes closing once more. "Aye, Captain." As he drifted back to sleep, Arla stayed beside him, watching in silence. For the first time in her long military life, she felt something new, something like hope. Maybe the galaxy still had a chance. Because somewhere among the stars, there were humans like him. The next few days passed slowly. The war outside the ship still raged on distant planets, but inside the medbay, time seemed to move differently. Every morning, Captain Arla came to visit the human. Sometimes she brought him food, sometimes she just sat quietly beside him, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat on the monitor. Hale was healing faster than anyone expected. The medics said humans were strange that way, their bodies weaker than most species, but their recovery faster when their minds were strong. And Hale's will was stronger than steel. On the fourth day, Rala entered the medbay and found him sitting up, staring at the stars through the window. He was out of bed despite strict orders not to move yet. His bandaged arm rested on the railing, his eyes calm and thoughtful. "You should not be standing," Rala said firmly, crossing her arms. He smiled without turning. "You sound like the doctor now, Captain," she frowned. "The doctor is right. You need rest." He glanced at her, amusement in his tired eyes. "I've had enough rest. I can't sleep forever while others fight." "You have done more than enough," she replied softly. "No one expects more from you." He looked at her for a moment, then back out the window. "That's the thing about humans," he said quietly. "We never feel like it's enough. Not when others are still in danger." Rilla walked closer. "You cannot save everyone, Hale." "I know," he whispered, his voice carrying a heavy sadness. "But that doesn't mean I won't try." Rilla felt her chest tighten again. She couldn't understand how he could still think of others after what he had been through. Most beings would beg for rest, for escape, but not this one. For a long moment, they both stood in silence, watching the endless stars. The galaxy outside looked peaceful, but both of them knew the truth. It was filled with pain and fear. Finally, Hale turned toward her. "Do you ever wonder, Captain, what all this fighting is for?" Rilla blinked. "It is for survival." "For peace," he nodded slowly. "Yeah, peace. Funny thing, though, every side says that." His words struck her deeper than she expected. He wasn't wrong. Every race, every army claimed to fight for peace, but peace always seemed to move farther away. "I fought for my people because I was told to," Rala admitted quietly. "But now, after what I saw, I am not sure what peace even means anymore." Hale smiled faintly. "Peace isn't something you're given, Captain. It's something you make. Every small act counts. Even saving one life in a war that seems endless. That's peace for a moment." Rala turned her head, studying him closely. "You speak like someone who has seen too much," he chuckled softly. "Maybe I have, but I'd rather see too much than stop caring." His words lingered in the air, heavy and honest. Rala didn't know how to respond. She just nodded slowly, her heart warm with something she didn't fully understand. Admiration, respect, maybe even affection. The medbay lights dimmed slightly as the ship entered a new orbit. Hale rubbed his eyes and leaned back against the wall, clearly tired. Rala took a step forward. "You should rest again. I will stay here until you wake." He smiled at her, gentle and genuine. "You don't have to babysit me, Captain." "Maybe I want to," she said softly. He blinked, surprised, then laughed quietly. "Careful, Captain. That almost sounded like friendship." "Maybe it is," she replied, her voice calm but sincere. He looked at her for a moment, and something unspoken passed between them. Two warriors from different worlds, bound not by duty but by understanding. Rala sat beside his bed once more. As Hale slowly drifted to sleep again, she whispered to herself, "Perhaps this is what humans bring to the galaxy. Not power, not fear, but heart." Outside, the stars shimmered softly, reflecting on the window like tiny embers of hope. And in that quiet room, Rella realized something beautiful. Sometimes, peace didn't come from victory. It came from connection, and for the first time in years, she smiled. The ship drifted peacefully through space for several days after that. For a brief moment, it felt as if the war had truly ended. The crew started to laugh again. The medbay was quieter. Captain Arla spent her evenings on the observation deck, sometimes joined by Hale, who was slowly regaining his strength. He still limped when he walked, his bandages still fresh, but his spirit was unbroken. Every time Rala told him to rest, he would grin and say, "Rest after victory," one evening. As they sat side by side watching a red nebula glow in the distance, Rala said quietly, "You humans are never still, are you?" Hale chuckled. "If we stop moving, Captain, we start thinking. And sometimes thinking hurts more than bleeding." Rayla looked at him with gentle eyes. "You speak like a philosopher, but you act like a madman." He laughed softly. "Maybe that's what it takes to survive in this galaxy." Before she could respond, the ship suddenly trembled. The deck lights flickered, and a loud alarm filled the corridor. Rilla's instincts flared immediately. She tapped her comlink. "Bridge report." A shaky voice replied, "Captain, we've entered an unstable plasma storm. The magnetic fields are collapsing, hull integrity dropping." Rilla's eyes widened. Plasma storms were among the deadliest things in deep space. Ships were torn apart in minutes if they weren't prepared. She turned to Hale. "You must stay here. You are not fit for duty." But Hale was already moving toward the door, ignoring the pain in his leg. "You'll need all hands, Captain. Hale!" "Not a debate," he said firmly, giving her that stubborn human look she had grown to know too well. "Let's save the ship." Within minutes, they were on the bridge. The storm outside was wild, rivers of electric light swirling in the black void, battering the ship like waves. Sparks flew from damaged panels. The crew shouted orders in panic. "Stabilizers offline! Power surge in Reactor 2! Shields dropping to 40%! Rilla took command instantly. "Divert power to shields! Keep the ship steady!" Hale rushed to the engineering console, his hands moving quickly over the controls. Despite his wounds, his focus was absolute. He rerouted energy from non-essential systems, his voice calm and clear even as chaos surrounded him. "Captain, if we vent the secondary plasma conduits, we can reduce the overload," he shouted. "That will expose the hull," Ralla warned. "Only for 10 seconds, he replied, determination burning in his eyes. 10 seconds and we live." Ralla hesitated, then nodded. "Do it." Hale slammed his hand on the control. A loud hiss filled the ship as plasma vented into space. For a moment, the ship rocked violently, alarms screaming. Rilla grabbed the railing, watching as lightning flashed across the windows. Then, silence. The storm slowly eased. The lights flickered back to normal. The ship stopped shaking. The crew began to cheer, relief washing over everyone. Rilla turned toward Hale. He was leaning against the console, breathing hard, his bandaged arm smoking slightly from a burst wire. She rushed to him. "You fool! You could have been killed!" He looked at her and smiled weakly. "But I wasn't. That's what matters." Rilla stared at him for a long moment, her heart pounding. She didn't know whether to scold him or thank him. "You humans," she whispered. "You never stop risking everything." Hale laughed softly. "That's what makes us human, Captain." As the medics arrived to help him, Rilla stepped back, watching in silence. He had done it again, saved them all without hesitation. Outside, the plasma storm faded into the distance, leaving behind calm stars and quiet peace. Inside, Rilla felt something new bloom in her chest. It wasn't just respect anymore. It was something deeper, something warm and human.